to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where the night is gentle and your thoughts can soften like mist on still water. Tonight's tale will carry you to a quiet shore where stargazing beside Sleepy Lake turns the sky into a slow, shimmering lullaby. Settle in the way your body most wants to rest. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. If your hands are holding anything tight, allow your fingers to loosen as if they've remembered they don't have to do any work now. Take a slow breath in as though you're breathing in cool, clean air through pine needles. And then breathe out longer, like a candle flame being carefully dimmed. With every breath, the day can step back. It can become a small thing at the edge of your mind, a distant shoreline you no longer need to walk along. Notice the weight of your body where it meets the bed, the way the blankets settle, the gentle pull of gravity, reminding you you're safe, supported, allowed to rest. Imagine that somewhere, not too far from where you are, a night is unfolding with perfect patience. The air is quiet, the world is unhurried, and there is a lake that sleeps with its eyes open, reflecting the sky as if it has all the time in the universe. Breathe in again, and as you breathe out, feel yourself drifting toward that place, toward Sleepy Lake. At the edge of a soft forest tucked between rounded hills and a ribbon of old pines, Sleepy Lake rested under a sky that seemed to belong to no one. The lake was not large, and it did not boast about its beauty the way grand mountains did. It simply existed, steady and calm, like a long-held sigh. The water held the moonlight the way a bowl holds milk, smooth and pale with faint ripples that moved like slow thoughts. The forest around it was stitched together with quiet sounds. A night bird calling once, then settling into silence. A distant rustle, perhaps a deer shifting among ferns, perhaps the wind gently rearranging the leaves. The pines stood tall and dark, their branches layered like careful hands, and between them the air smelled of resin, cool earth, and the faint sweetness of moss. Along the near shore, a narrow path curved like a sleepy smile. It was a path made by long familiarity, by wandering feet, by curious pause, by the patient passing of seasons. The stones beside it were soft-edged, smoothed by rain and time. And near the path, half hidden behind a curtain of willow branches, sat a little cabin with a lamp glowing in one window. The cabin belonged to a woman named Mira, though the forest itself seemed to have chosen her. Or perhaps she'd chosen the forest long ago and simply never left. Mira was neither young nor old in any way that mattered. She had the kind of presence that blended with the night. Calm, unpressured, as if she moved in a rhythm the world had forgotten. Inside the cabin, the air was warm. A kettle rested on a small iron stove, and a cup waited beside it, patiently empty. Shelves held jars of dried herbs, neatly labeled in tidy writing. A blanket, hand-woven and heavy with comfort, lay draped over the back of a chair, as if it had been placed there to catch anyone who might drift past and need softness. Mira moved quietly, not because she needed to be silent, but because the night invited it. She poured hot water over a pinch of chamomile and a curl of mint, watching the steam rise in slow spirals. The steam made little clouds that vanished almost as soon as they appeared, like dreams that decide not to stay. Tonight was a special kind of night, though it didn't announce itself loudly. It simply felt open. The air had a clarity to it, as if it had been washed. The sky was deep and clean, the sort of sky that invited stargazing, the way a fresh bed invites sleep. Mira carried her cup to the window and looked out. The lake lay beyond the trees, and above it the stars were beginning to brighten, one by one, as if someone were gently turning on lanterns in the heavens. She sipped her tea, letting warmth move through her chest. And as she stood there, she remembered something the old caretaker of the lake had once said years ago, when Mira was still learning the language of this place. Sleepy Lake is a listening lake, the caretaker had murmured, his voice rough but kind. It listens to the sky at night. It listens so well that sometimes the sky listens back. At the time, Mira had smiled politely, assuming it was just a poetic way of speaking. The caretaker had always talked like that, as if he knew secrets the world didn't bother to keep. But over the years, Mira had come to understand that the lake truly did have its own kind of attention. On certain nights like this one, the water seemed to hold more than reflections. It held a feeling, a hush so complete it felt like a doorway. When Mira finished her tea, she set the cup down and gathered a few things with gentle care. A lantern, small and warm, a cushion, a folded blanket, a notebook with a smooth cover, though she didn't plan to write, she simply liked having it near, and a tiny tin of star biscuits she had baked earlier. Simple oat cookies shaped like little points and crescents, dusted with a whisper of sugar. She stepped outside, and the cool air wrapped around her like clean linen. She paused on the cabin's small porch, just long enough to let her eyes adjust. The night was wide and softly luminous. Fireflies hovered near the ground, blinking as if practicing a slow, sleepy Morse code. Mira began to walk down the path toward the lake. Her lantern swung gently, casting a honeyed circle of light that moved over stones and roots. The path seemed to guide her with familiarity, leading her between pines and past a cluster of ferns that glimmered faintly with dew. As she walked, she could feel the day loosening from her shoulders. The tiny responsibilities of daylight, meals, chores, messages, decisions, fell away, as if they were leaves drifting off a branch. Here in the forest, she belonged only to the moment, only to the next step, the next breath, the next small sound. The trees opened at the shoreline, revealing Sleepy Lake in its moonlit stillness. The water was calm, almost impossibly calm, like a sheet of dark glass. A thin layer of mist hovered near the surface, drifting slowly as though the lake were exhaling. Mira chose her favorite spot, where a smooth, flat rock reached out toward the water like a patient seat. She laid her blanket down and placed the cushion on top. She set the lantern beside her, turning it low so the light would not compete with the stars. Then she sat. In that moment, everything seemed to settle into place. The forest quieted, as if it too had been waiting. The lake held its breath, and the sky above, scattered with stars, seemed to lean closer. Mira tilted her head back and looked up. The night sky was a deep velvet blue, so dark it almost felt soft. Stars pricked through it in clusters and streams. Some were bright and steady, others faint like shy whispers. A few seemed to twinkle with playful intention, as though they were winking at anyone who bothered to notice. There were constellations Mira recognized, shapes she had learned as a child, long before she lived beside this lake. And there were patterns she had never named, patterns that looked like secret stories scribbled in light. She let her gaze drift. At first, her mind offered its usual thoughts, small reminders, half-finished ideas, gentle worries that tried to pick at her attention. But Mira had learned not to fight them. She simply allowed them to float by like leaves on the water. She breathed in the cool night air. She breathed out and felt herself soften. And then something changed. Not dramatically, not with a sudden flare, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the moment before a lullaby begins. The mist over Sleepy Lake thickened slightly, gathering in a slow swirl near the center. It moved as if it were listening to something. The lake's surface, still reflecting the stars, began to shimmer, not from wind, but from a kind of inner glow. Mira sat up a little straighter, her eyes calm but curious. She had seen the lake do strange, gentle things before. Lights drifting over the water like sleepy lanterns, ripples that formed without any obvious cause. But tonight's shimmer felt different. It felt inviting. The glow beneath the mist brightened, and the stars reflected on the water began to look deeper, as though the lake had become a window rather than a mirror. Mira watched without rushing. She let the moment unfold in its own time. And slowly, in the heart of the mist, a small shape rose from the water. It was not a creature in the usual sense. It was made of soft light, the way moonlight might gather itself into a form. It hovered just above the surface, drifting as if it weighed nothing at all. It was round and delicate, like a pearl of brightness wrapped in fog. As it rose, a second glow appeared, then a third. Soon, several small lights floated above the lake, each one pulsing gently as if breathing. Mira felt a familiar warmth in her chest. She had heard stories about these, about the lake's star lanterns, as the caretaker had called them, little pieces of night that wandered close to the earth when the sky felt generous. The lights drifted toward the shore with slow, unhurried grace. They did not seem alarmed by Mira's presence. If anything, they seemed pleased, as though they recognized her quietness. One of the lights came closer than the others. It hovered just beyond the edge of the rock where Mira sat, pulsing softly. Mira held her breath for a moment, then exhaled slowly, letting her calm reach outward like a gentle hand. The light responded with a brighter glow. Mira smiled, small and private. "Hello," she whispered, though the word was less a sound and more a feeling. The light drifted slightly to the side, as if offering her a view of the lake. Mira followed its suggestion, turning her gaze back to the water's surface. And there, where the mist swirled, the reflection of the stars began to rearrange. Not the real stars above, those remained steady, but the reflected stars in the lake moved like ink in water, shifting into new constellations. Shapes formed, slow, graceful patterns made of starlight and shimmering ripples. Mira watched as a shape appeared that looked like a long-tailed comet, curling in a loop. Then it dissolved into a spiral of tiny points, like a galaxy seen from far away. The lake was telling stories, not with words, but with light and movement. Not with urgency, but with a dreamy patience that asked nothing from the viewer. Mira felt herself sinking into the moment, her thoughts growing quieter, her breathing slowing. She became aware of the steady rhythm of the lake's tiny movements, the pulse of the hovering lights, the soft hush of the forest. She reached for one of her star biscuits, more as a ritual than a need. She took a small bite. It tasted of oats and honey, simple and comforting, like something made for late nights. As she chewed, she noticed another presence beside her. Not a human presence, something smaller, closer to the ground. A fox had appeared at the edge of the trees, its coat a muted rust color in the moonlight. It stood still, watching the lake with an expression that seemed almost thoughtful. Its ears flicked once, and then it stepped forward carefully, paws silent on the damp earth. The fox paused a short distance away, as if asking permission without words. Mira didn't move suddenly. She simply shifted her posture a little, making room in the world for this visitor. The fox came closer and sat on its haunches near the rock, its tail wrapped around its feet like a warm scarf. Together, Mira and the fox watched the lake's starlit stories. More animals arrived quietly. A pair of rabbits appeared near a patch of grass, their noses twitching. An owl landed on a nearby branch, feathers blending with shadow, eyes bright and unblinking. Even a small mouse crept near the lantern's glow, then decided it was too bright and retreated to the safety of darkness. None of them seemed afraid. None of them seemed hurried. It was as if Sleepy Lake had called them all, and the night had agreed. The floating lights drifted higher, forming a slow circle above the water. They pulsed in a rhythm that felt like a lullaby with no melody, just a gentle, steady cadence. Mira's gaze softened. Her eyelids grew a little heavier, not with boredom, but with comfort, with the quiet permission to let go. The lake's reflection shifted again, This time the starlight formed a path, an arc of brightness stretching across the water from one shore to the other. It looked like a bridge made of moonbeams and tiny sparks. For a moment the mist parted and Mira thought she saw something beneath the surface. Not a fish, not a log, something older, something that belonged to the lake in a way humans did not. The water deepened into a dark, velvety blue, and within it a shape moved, slow and enormous, like a sleeping whale made of shadow and stars. It drifted beneath the surface without making a ripple, as if it existed in a world just beside this one. Mira did not feel fear, only awe, gentle and distant, like watching a storm far out at sea while standing safely on shore. The shape turned, and for a heartbeat, the lake's surface brightened as though it had opened its eyes. Then the mist folded back in, soft as a blanket, and the shape disappeared. The floating lights lowered slightly, as if reassuring everyone gathered there. Their glow warmed the air, turning the night into something almost tangible, something you could wrap around your shoulders. Mira found herself breathing in time with them. In and out. In and out. The fox beside her shifted closer, settling more comfortably. The owl blinked slowly, its head dipping as though it too felt the pull of sleep. The lake continued its quiet storytelling, now forming shapes that were simpler, slower. A crescent that became a cradle, a line of points that became a gentle wave, a cluster that looked like a bouquet of tiny lanterns. Mira's mind drifted into memory. She remembered being a child lying on the grass, counting stars until the numbers became meaningless and her thoughts dissolved into the sky. She remembered the feeling of the night air on her cheeks, the sense that the universe was vast, but not lonely. Here beside Sleepy Lake, that feeling returned. The world was large, yes. The sky was endless, but the night was kind. The forest was steady. The lake was listening. And Mira, small, warm, breathing, was part of it. A soft breeze moved through the trees, stirring the leaves with a sighing sound. The lantern's flame flickered, then steadied. The floating lights responded by pulsing a little brighter, as if they enjoyed the breeze. Across the lake, far on the opposite shore, a faint glow appeared among the trees. It was not Mira's cabin. It was too distant, too subtle. It looked like a single lantern hanging from a branch, or perhaps a firefly that had decided to become a star. Mira watched it, curious but calm. The glow shifted, moving slowly along the far shore. It did not rush. It did not dart like an animal. It drifted like mist, like a thought. And then, as Mira watched, she saw a figure beneath it. A person, walking slowly along the shoreline. Their shape was faint in the moonlight, their footsteps soundless across the distance. They carried a lantern, and their cloak moved softly behind them like a shadow that had learned to dance. The figure paused beneath a tree, lifting their lantern as if to look up at the stars. Mira's breath caught, not in alarm, but in recognition, not of the person's identity, but of the feeling they brought. This was someone who belonged to the night. The figure turned slightly, and the lantern's glow revealed a gentle face, calm eyes, and hair that looked silvered by moonlight. They seemed neither young nor old, much like Mira herself, as if time moved differently for those who listened to lakes and skies. The figure raised a hand, not waving exactly, but acknowledging Mira's presence across the water. The gesture was slow and simple, as if saying, "Yes, you see me, and yes, I see you." Mira lifted her own hand in return, the movement small and unhurried. The figure began walking again, moving along the far shore until the trees swallowed them and the lantern glow faded into the forest's darkness. Mira felt a softness settle in her chest. There were others in the world who listened like this, who moved gently enough to be welcomed by quiet places. It was comforting to know, even without meeting them, that they existed. The floating lights drifted lower now, hovering near the water's surface. The lake's reflection slowed, becoming less like stories and more like steady, soothing patterns, ripples that shimmered, then smoothed, then shimmered again. The animals around Mira began to relax further. The rabbits leaned close together, their bodies small and round. The fox's eyes half closed, its breathing slow and even. The owl tucked its head slightly, feathers puffed in a comfortable way. Mira reached for her blanket and pulled it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm, and it smelled faintly of cedar and sunlight, as though it had stored the memory of daytime warmth just for this moment. She looked up at the stars again, and they seemed closer now, not because they had moved, but because her mind had grown quieter. Without the noise of thought, the sky felt like it could lean in. A shooting star streaked across the darkness, a quick, silent line of light. It vanished almost immediately, leaving behind only the memory of its motion. Mira didn't make a wish. She didn't need to. This moment itself felt like enough. The lake gave another gentle shimmer, and the floating lights responded by moving in a slow spiral, like a dance learned long ago. Their glow reflected on the water, doubling the softness, making the lake look as though it held two skies, one above and one below. Mira's eyelids grew heavier. She let them close for a moment, then open again. Close, then open. Each blink felt like sinking deeper into comfort. The forest seemed to breathe with her. In the distance, a soft sound drifted over the water, perhaps a frog calling once, low and sleepy. Then silence again. A silence that did not feel empty but full of calm, full of rest. The floating lights began to move back toward the center of the lake, as if their visit was ending. They drifted in a slow line, each one leaving a faint trail of brightness that dissolved behind them like a dream, fading gently at morning. Mira watched them go, her mind quiet and accepting. She knew they would return on another clear night, when the lake felt like listening again. The mist thickened slightly, folding over the water like a blanket being pulled up. The reflections of the stars softened, becoming hazier, as if the lake was closing its eyes. Mira's breathing slowed further. Her shoulders relaxed. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. The fox beside her stood, stretched its front legs in a long, luxurious arc, then padded quietly back toward the trees. The rabbits followed soon after, disappearing into shadow. The owl lifted its wings with hardly a sound and glided away, leaving the branch gently swaying. Mira was alone again, but not lonely. The lake was still there. The forest was still there. The sky was still there. And the quiet was a companion. She remained seated for a while longer, letting the night settle fully. There was no need to hurry back to the cabin, but eventually the coolness of the air began to remind her of warmth, of blankets, of sleep. She stood slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. She picked up her lantern and turned the flame a little brighter. The light made a small golden circle on the path, like a pocket of evening sunshine. Before she left, Mira looked at Sleepy Lake one last time. The mist had become smoother, quieter. The water was almost perfectly still. The stars above continued to shine, patient and steady. And for a moment, Mira felt certain, deep in her bones, that the lake truly was listening. Listening to the sky, listening to the forest, listening to her. Perhaps in its own mysterious way, it was also listening to anyone who dreamed of it, anyone who needed a calm place to drift toward sleep. Mira whispered, "Good night," not just to the lake, but to everything around her. Then she turned and began to walk back to her cabin, lantern swinging gently, footsteps soft on the path. The forest welcomed her with quiet shadows. The pines stood like guardians, their branches layered and calm. The air grew a little warmer as she neared home, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and dried herbs. When Mira reached the cabin, she stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. The warmth wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. She set the lantern down and moved through her small home in the slow, dreamy way of someone already halfway asleep. She placed her notebook back on the shelf without opening it. Some nights were for writing. Tonight was for simply being. She changed into comfortable clothes and pulled back the blankets on her bed. The sheets were cool at first, then quickly warmed beneath her. She lay down, turning onto her side, her body finding its favorite shape. Outside, Sleepy Lake rested under the stars. The mist drifted lazily. The forest held its hush. Mira's eyes closed, and her breathing became even slower, even softer. The images of the lake and the floating lights lingered behind her eyelids like gentle afterglow. The sky above the trees remained vast and peaceful. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of any worry, stars continued to shine with quiet certainty. And here in this small cabin near a listening lake, sleep arrived the way it should, unforced, unhurried, kind. The night wraps around everything now smooth and gentle. The lake sleeps. The forest sleeps. The stars keep watch without asking anything of you. You can let go. Let your thoughts drift out like mist over still water. Let your breath be slow. Let your body be heavy and safe. There is nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to carry. Only this softness. Only this quiet. Only the slow, steady comfort of a peaceful night by Sleepy Lake. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.